Good afternoon and welcome back to this lecture on a brief overview of Blender. So for any artists or 3D modelers out there which already know how to use Blender, this may not be worthwhile watching really. You could probably work out what I've done with the models by just opening the asset yourself. And also I won't be going too in-depth with the process of using Blender. This is more a quick hack of how you can change some of the assets I've given you if you wanted to amend the color, the UVs, and some simple modeling techniques on it. As I said, this isn't really going to be an artistic course. I don't have much of an artistic talent. Everything that I've made in 3D modeling packages I've taught myself. So if anyone is interested to know where I've picked up those skills or some of the resources I've used for that, then do get involved in the discussions on the message boards, and I'll be happy to share some of the online resources I've used to teach myself 3D modeling. So what we have on screen at the moment is the default interface for Blender. I've changed the theme, so you might get a lighter grey version of it, but this is the window that you are greeted with. You can just click away from that and you get given a simple grey box, and again we can just delete that. So the important thing that I wanted to show is if we go to File and then Import and then FBX. So FBX is the type of file that we're using for 3D models. It's a fairly standard model type for game development, that and the OBJ, which is the wavefront OBJ. But if we select to import an FBX, and we can go to the desktop and assets where I've saved them, and I'm just going to import the enemy ship 2. So now we have the model in the game, and what we can do is we could go in here and we could begin editing this again. So we can start changing the scale of things and just doing some simple amendments to the models as you like. The only problem with doing it this way is that it doesn't have all of the information that I've tried saving and making easily adaptable. You would need to work out some of the interface yourself and work out where the UV maps and things are. So what I've done is I've also included the blend file that I was using. So that's the file. If we go to open rather than import, we can see the ships.blend. So I've provided this because this gives you the same layout that I was using when I last saved this. So on this side, just here, we can see the texture. And this is for the UV mapping. So this is what provides the color to the model. So for example, we've got the coin here. If I go into edit mode by pressing tab with the object selected, and then if I press A, that deselects everything, and then if I press A again, that selects everything. And with everything selected, what I can do is we can see in this window to the side the wireframe lines here represent the different points on the model which I've been able to apply to the UV maps. So these two bits in the yellow section correspond to the yellow faces of the coin, and then you can see the grey sections here correspond to the outer grey part of the coin. So if you wanted to change the colour of this coin, for example, what we can do is you go into this window with the UV mapping, you press B, and you can drag select over the sections you want to change the colour of. You then press G and we can move this to a different area, so you can now have a pink coin. And that's really it. That's as difficult as it is to amend the UV maps I've given you. It's slightly more difficult to UV map, and unfortunately I'm not going to be able to go into that because UV mapping is such a complex subject on its own that there are videos and videos all going through different ways to do it and the best, most optimal ways to do it. So again, I'm more than happy to share those in the discussion if people are interested in how to learn UV mapping, but it's not something I'm going to have the scope to cover, unfortunately. But this will at least give you a way to adapt mine. So again, you just press B and then G to move it, and you can do that for everything down here as well. So we can have a strange coin with a green outer colour. Now the concept behind this is exactly the same for the ships. So the cylinder is the coin. I forgot to rename that one. So if we hide this, To do that, you need to press A and tab so you're not selected on it anymore. And then let's find enemy 2. So enemy 2 is our ship. And then if we press tab to enter edit mode again, we can see the UV map here has changed. So the sections we have here, they're not quite as obvious to look at. You wouldn't be able to tell quite as quickly which faces correspond to which, but again, that's easily worked out by looking at the colours of the ship itself. So all of the black faces are in this section, all of the blue faces are in this section, and all of the grey faces are in this section. So again, if you wanted to create your own UV map, I'm going to go into more detail on the dimensions of this texture and how to make it in the next lecture. So you can either change the texture itself, or you could begin to simply move the faces around, and again we can very easily now change what this ship looks like just by moving the UV textures around. There's not really an insight, unfortunately, on how to UV map, but hopefully this will give you an idea of how to adapt the UVs that I've provided for you. So everything that is in the project has been correctly UV mapped, so it will be lit properly in the game, and it will also receive shadows and things correctly. So it's very important to be able to UV map if you're going to model. But as I said, if you are doing that, and there's plenty of resources out there from people much more experienced than myself in modeling that would be able to guide you through those processes. But these are the processes I've used to model these. So I've done this through Blender, I've UV mapped everything in Blender, and I've made them very simple to change the colours and the colour schemes in the game. And I've not done that just for editability. This is also going to be a really efficient way to add the assets into the game. And again, I'll go through more detail in that in the next lecture, because that's more of a 2D side of things. But one thing that I can get across in Blender is if I hide that one, it's very interesting to see that when we edit this, the UV map doesn't necessarily change at all, or the texture doesn't change at all. So all of the enemies and the players, and in fact all of the objects in the game, can use essentially the same UV map. So we only need one texture for all of the objects, which when we start looking into what materials are and how to use them, it also means that we only need a few materials for the entire game as well. And it does mean that we can do some quick changes. So I think that's going to be really useful to understand as we go forward. So I'll leave that there for our introduction to Blender. For anyone who's interested in modelling or getting into modelling though, I would definitely say that Blender's a great starting point. It's got some really good tutorials out there from people. It's got a great following because it's completely free to use, which is another really good aspect of it. If you're just getting into the 3D modelling, it's a good place to start, and there's not really a negative aspect of trying it, because if it doesn't go very well, then you didn't lose any money in trying it. So that's always good as well. And I think because it's open source and because it's got such a following of users, there's always help and useful information on the forums regarding it as well. So yeah, I definitely say give it a try if you've never used Blender or a 3D modeling program before. It's definitely a good one to practice and play about with. So I'll leave that there for the introduction to Blender. The main thing that we've got out of this is again how we can move the UV components around on the textures that I've already provided, and we'll see more about what these textures are and what they're doing in the next lecture. Look forward to that, and I will see you there.